So, our first session today, it is one of a topic that has thankfully risen to the top of agendas around the world, and not just in media. It is around mental health, and our first opening speaker is an author and a journalist, and someone who has tragically been through a situation of mental health. But she's got a great presentation. So please, without further ado, let's welcome to the stage, Poorna Bell. Yes!
Thank you so much. Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for waking up early to hear me speak. So, as Jeremy said, I'm here to talk to you about mental health, and you might be looking at this and thinking, okay, why is there a picture of a woman throwing a javelin on there? It's not going to segue into some uplifting sports metaphor. The reason that's there is because I learned how to throw one of these at school. And to me, as someone who works in the space of mental health, the javelin has become the symbol of utterly useless things that I learned at school that I have never applied in everyday life. Added to that, how to throw a shot put, and in my specific case, how to make my own dream catcher. That was deemed a more important skill than learning how to, I don't know, cope with exam pressures, let's say. Now, the thing that I wish that I had been taught the most about in school is this, and I'm not just talking about the biological function of it, because this is really where our mental health emanates from. This is everything that we are. It's the most complex organ in our bodies. It never sleeps. It weighs roughly under 3 pounds. It is the engine room of who we are. Take a moment to think about it, because it's not just electrics and nerves and instructions. Your brain is the seat of power. Sure, it determines how smart you are. It hopefully made you have a shower this morning. It is the thing that nurtures you. You evolve, you grow with it. But it's also the thing that makes you fall in love. It's the thing that makes you feel happiness. It makes you feel. And yet I don't think most of us have been brought up in a world where we're taught to really think about it, where we're taught how to nurture it, how to even have conversations about it when things go wrong. And the fact is, for most of my life, and I'd probably guess maybe for most of you, is that I was never taught to think about my own mental health. You know, to me it was very invisible. I was taught about physical health. I mean, I was taught how to throw a javelin. But that was deemed a more useful skill than how to cope with stress and anxiety, or even to know what anxiety and depression was. And the impact of all of that was that I grew up believing that mental health wasn't really a thing. You know, the visibility just wasn't there. I didn't see it on my TV screens. Beyond maybe the depiction of schizophrenia, I didn't really see mentally ill characters, and definitely not in advertising. And why weren't they? Because money and power do not make you immune to mental health problems. You know, it doesn't care about the watch that's on your wrist, the handbag that you're carrying. It's something that affects people from every background, every age, every gender. And as Jeremy alluded to, you know, I'm on here because I feel very powerful and passionate about mental health, as we all should do, because we all have mental health. But I'm also here for very, very personal reasons. So 4 years ago, my husband, Rob, suffered from depression, and he took his own life. Now, it's very complicated, and I don't know, I can't pinpoint any one thing that would have helped him, but one thing that would have helped him and me would have been maybe growing up in a society that understood all of this a bit better. And I think that that would have helped him to maybe access support and help a bit better. Because our approach to mental health so far, it's not at a great place. You know, 1 in 4 people in the UK will experience a mental health problem. In the EU, it's 1 in 6. Even if you don't care about society, the economic impact is immense. It costs the EU 600 billion euros across 28 countries. That's 4% of the GDP. In the UK, it costs the economy 94 billion a year. And the number of people off sick for stress a year, it's increasing in the UK. It's not decreasing. It accounted for over 50% of workplace illness. Now, the latest report from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development said that in 2015, the number of people that died because of mental ill health and suicide, that's the number of people, 84,000. And that might look like a number to you, but my husband died in 2015, so that's not just a number to me, that's very, very personal. Depressive disorders affect 21 million people. Anxiety disorders affect 25 million people. Like, these are huge numbers. And to just give you context, you know, mental illness and health is a spectrum, and at the extreme end, you have got illness that requires medical attention. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is about mental distress, because a lot of that is preventable, and that's where I think we've actually got a huge kind of scope for change. And okay, you might be thinking, that is a lot. She has told us some really hefty statistics. She's told us a very full-on personal story. You might work for an automotive brand or an agency that's known for humorous campaigns. Like, what's my role here? What can I do? And I think that you can do a lot, because what does advertising do? Like, what do brands do? You tell stories in the most powerful ways. You wield the power to literally shape how we think, how we view ourselves. You're the reflecting pool for our society. And yeah, sure, you know what? Sometimes that goes horribly wrong. But I think that actually if we do it in the right way, we can change how we think, and we can rebuild from that in a place that's just a lot more positive and actually can just change the world that we're in. And I think as we move into this age of authenticity, you know, people are looking for more from their brands than just a product. I think that they're looking for things that they can actually engage with. And there are some brands and agencies who are getting this right in a really good way, and who are dovetailing this conversation that we're having on social media and that we're having in editorial media. And I want to show and share with you a video of a company that's managed to do both. So this is Lloyd's, and it's a campaign that they did called Get the Inside Out.
We're going to live?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Can I still work?
Probably.
Could mine make me hurt myself?
So it's an eating disorder?
I think so.
Am I to blame?
Will I ever get better?
Will people stare at me?
Would they say that guy is nuts?
Do you even know what this one is?
No.
Could telling my boss help?
Might it make me feel like a failure?
Would life be a bit easier if I wasn't part of it?
Mental health problems affect 1 in 4 of our customers, of our staff, of everyone.
Anorexia. Wow.
Let's get it out in the open. Lloyds Bank, by your side.
Now, to me, that's a brand that shows how you take that mental health conversation forward. But before we have a look at how to move forward, we need to just slightly look backwards. So the conversation around mental health, it's improving. I mean, you probably hear more about it nowadays than you've ever heard about it, and that's great. But we got to this point of crisis over decades. We didn't get here overnight, so it's going to take a little bit longer to unravel some of that. And I don't think there's one thing we can point the finger of blame at, but for me there's 2 things that have been working in tandem that have made the situation maybe worse than it needs to be. So the first is, as I said before, we did not grow up in a world that really understood mental health, where we had an understanding of it. It was largely ignored by media and advertising until recent years. But the second thing for me as well is that we also have these very narrow ideas of gender, which have been perpetuated in the media and in advertising, that I think have fueled some of the mental health problems that we've had. So I'm going to start with men first. So in the UK, the biggest killer of men under 45, which some of you know, is suicide. In the EU, 8 out of 10 suicides are men. We've heard this phrase, toxic masculinity. Gillette did an incredible ad for it last year with some controversy. And if I'm being honest with you, I don't really know how much I like that as a phrase, but I get what it's trying to say. It's basically saying that what we think being a man is not actually really working for modern day men. So it doesn't mean that if you like traditional male pursuits, like, I don't know, football, beer, chopping wood, whatever it is that's considered to be traditionally male, that that's wrong. It's just saying that that's become shorthand for masculinity, and it's not. Because the template for what we think strong, successful, happy, thriving men is actually very, very narrow, and it's very fixed. And it's not creating strong, successful, happy, thriving men. Completely the reverse. So, you know, we're looking at a situation where I think the shorthand for men has just been that you like sports, you like action movies, you know, you don't have real conversations, you have banter. You like your big TV, your big car, big explosions, big everything. And I just don't really think that that's working for us. And I think that one of the ads that I want to show you, I think really summarizes that for us. And this is a Dr. Pepper ad.
Hey, ladies. Enjoying the film? Of course not. Because this is our movie! And Dr. Pepper 10 is our soda. It's only 10 manly calories, but with all 23 flavors of Dr. Pepper. It's what guys want, like this. Catchphrase. So you can keep the romantic comedies and lady drinks. We're good. Dr. Pepper 10, it's not for women!
Now, I know that's supposed to be funny, but number one, it's so noisy. I realize that makes me sound incredibly old, but it's so noisy, it's just mash. And I know that's a Dr. Pepper ad, but I've seen that played out for lots and lots of different brands. And I think that that's what we've been told in advertising about men over and over again, which is that what does it tell me about the strength of men beyond physical strength? Strength is a 360-degree thing. It's not just about how much you can lift and carry. What does it actually celebrate about men that really counts? And I think that what advertising has done when it comes to men is to advertise to what they think men want to see. Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting to play football or chopping wood or any of that kind of stuff, but there is something when that's the only template that you're presented with, because it doesn't just use the idea of fantasy to sell you something. It has become this thing which is telling you what a man is, the role that you portray when you are in everyday life. And there's no flexibility outside of these roles. And to me, we know this already when it comes to men, that there's the big driver of mental distress is the template, where you actually are, the gap between those two things, and not knowing what the hell goes into that gap. So to me, it's not a coincidence that suicide rates are higher in men, that men are more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, that more men are in prison. This isn't something that's built into your DNA. To me, this is a gender issue. And to me, this is evidence that that template that we have for men, that we have been pushing through branding and advertising, it's not really working. And I'm not saying that we just do what works for women and we just apply it to men. I think that brands can do it in a way that's right for men, that speaks to men, that looks at how you broaden those expectations. And I'm going to play you, this is like the direct opposite of the Dr. Pepper advert. This is a campaign that I really, really love, which is Time to Change, which is a UK charity.
Whoa. Can I help you?
We're John's mates. Is he around?
Yeah. He's over there.
Cheers, mate.
Right, John. All right, boys. Go sit down.
1 in 4 of us will fight mental health problems this year.
You can do this, John. We're with you.
We're with you, mate.
Having a mate in your corner can make all the difference. So if your mate's acting differently, step in.
Here we go now. The bell's out.
Search Time to Change.
So the reason why I love this ad so much is because it draws such strong parallels between mental and physical health. And it doesn't always have to be such heavy conversations. You know, there are companies such as Axe and Lynx who are doing amazing things around redefining masculinity and how you can do it in a humorous way. And they undertook a big piece of work in 2016 which delved into what men want to see. And what men want to see are broader depictions of men. Now, a lot of that has got to do with family dynamics changing. But also, I mean, newsflash, like, not all men are heterosexual. And that's actually where a lot of the advertising seems to be based around. So for men to step up, whether that's being a better mate, whether that is taking responsibility for your mental health, or maybe helping out a bit more domestically, men have to see other men doing the same. And what happens in the male landscape affects what happens in the women's landscape. And women have been depicted in horrendously cliched ways for a very, very long time. There are some brands doing amazingly well, but there's no shying away from this. And I want to share with you one of my favorite ads that I feel sums it up in a way that I could never really say, where they have taken the narrative of very stereotypical advertising, the way that advertising talks about women, and they've layered it over what they actually do. And their tagline, this is the RAF, the Royal Air Force in the UK, and their tagline is, "Women are defined by actions, not cliches."
Fine lines and wrinkles? I want to combat the signs of aging.
Eat strong, healthy hair. What's my secret?
With my busy life, I don't have time to slow down.
I can't believe we turned up wearing the same thing.
I want a lip gloss that can stay on whatever life throws at me.
All-day protection, now with wings, so I can handle anything.
Women should be defined by actions, not cliches. Every role in the RAF is open to everyone, from spare time to the front line.
So gender stereotyping matters when it comes to mental health, because advertising historically has placed women in one of two roles, the domestic role or appearance-based. And that has a domino effect, and that impacts things like social factors. So whether that's a career woman who feels like she has to juggle everything, whether that's women on lower incomes, whether that's women being the primary caregivers, and all of that impacts women's mental health. Girls are sold the aspiration of looking pretty. Girls are sold boys are sold the adventure. And that is from an advert that I've seen in the last 12 months. It's more important about what we look like rather than what we actually say. We are told to slim ourselves down. We are told to look timeless, ageless. This is the narrative constantly. In the kitchen, during a big celebration, whether that's a festive celebration, a woman can be at the top of her game in her career, but mysteriously she's the only one that knows how to use an oven in an advert at that time of year. And forget being told what women should be like. We are told that the most important thing for a woman is what we should look like. Now, I could do a whole keynote on this, but I think that we should know what sexist advertising looks like. We should be able to recognize that, I think, fairly quickly. And to me, it's more than just sexist advertising. It's looking ahead at how we change that entire structure. Like, how do we change the system so that girls who are coming up behind us don't even know the difference, don't even know that there's a difference between boys and girls? How do we make sure that women are reflected at every single level of the power structure? And this stuff matters because I'm going to use the UK as an example. In the UK, girls and boys, when it comes to mental health, you know, they're kind of neck and neck in terms of numbers and people who suffer from it. But at 17, something happens. So at 17, girls are twice as likely to have a mental health problem. 1 in 4 of them will have a mental health disorder. And out of that 1 in 4, 50% of them, which is a whopping number, will have attempted some form of self-harm or will have attempted suicide. And women may have lower rates than men when it comes to suicide, let's say, but they are twice as likely to have a mental health problem, and they're twice as likely to, for example, have anxiety disorder. Now, there are other accumulative mental stresses, and a big one that's in the news a lot at the moment is body image. And, you know, social media has been blamed a lot for this, but I think we kind of need to dial it back slightly. So the UK Advertising Association did a report, and they found that 47% of girls, when they were shown pictures of thin models, immediately wanted to go on a diet. In the US, 23% of women who are in adverts don't have the same body size that the average woman does. 20 years ago, that difference was maybe 8%. And since the 1970s, eating disorders have increased by 400%, which is huge. And the fact is, we have to own up to this. You know, advertising is responsible for fostering female self-dissatisfaction and also profiting off it. And I think the reason why it's now escalated into this huge mental health problem is because that's been fine so far. Well, not fine, but it's been fine so far while it's been pushing products, but now it's been completely supercharged by social media, and so that's why we have this crisis problem. And one of my favorite women, she's an ad critic and documentary maker, is Jean Kilbourne, who says, this is why this is the problem. Women and girls compare themselves to these images every day, and failure to live up to them is inevitable because they are based on a flawlessness that doesn't exist. And aside from this impossible standard of body image and beauty, you know, one of the things that I had to point out was underpinning some of this stuff is, for instance, how food is sold to women. You know, food is sold in a very emotional way. And it ends up actually being a proxy to love in the way that I don't think it's sold to men. So consider the single girl and the narrative around chocolate, right? And it's like, I don't need a man, I have chocolate. Like, when has chocolate ever been sold to men in that way? Or the mother who, you know, is busy at work, but she's like making cookies or baking a cake with her kid, and then you see the shot of her giving the cookies to the kid, and there's a transaction there of love. Now, men are not shown spending time with their kids in that way. And I'm not saying if you like baking with your kid, if you are a single woman who would rather eat chocolate than swiping on a dating app, that's fine, more power to you. But the problem is when it is only women who are portrayed in this way. Because in the same way, when we come to talking about men, is that we have to have broader examples of what being a woman is. Because when it comes to especially domestic stuff, we add in an enormous piece of work from the International Social Survey Program. It looked at 24 countries, 2 years, and they talked to women, and they found that their mental health was really impacted. They felt a lot of guilt and stress because they weren't balancing, or what they thought they were balancing, between their work and also what they're doing at home in terms of their perceived household duties. Now, in the UK, men and women do the same number of hours of work. Men get paid 25% more. Women do twice the amount of housework. I mean, that to me, for women, I know that we're newer in the workplace than men, but it sounds like the world's like worst job promotion. Like basically your hours double, but you don't get paid enough. And I think that what brands and agencies should be looking to do is to empower women and encourage them to lead by example. And I think it is more than using sexist advertising, because I think social media is already nailing that. So this was an ad that came out on International Women's Day, no less. Within hours, someone rewrote it, which is great. So this is, I think that brands can get on board with this kind of stuff, but actually I think that there are better ways of, you know, doing this. And I think that, look, we know that women need to get paid more than men. We know that there need to be more women at a senior level. Like, we know all of this stuff. For me, the way that brands can help with the stresses that women are facing is in 2 ways. The first is feature more women that look like women. It's not rocket science, you know? Like more color diversity, more body diversity. I know that youth is lionized, but they don't have any money. Like, sell to older women. We actually have money. And I think that the second is confidence building. I mean, I'm looking to brands that are going to give me fire and energy and raw, and yes, will make me negotiate for more money in a situation when I need it, but also those micro moments when it just comes to, you know, speaking up and feeling like my voice actually counts. And for me, one of my favorite ads that really sums this up, I still have goosebumps when I watch it, is the ad is from Nike, and it was voiced by Serena Williams. And to me, Nike is becoming one of these leaders when it comes to female empowerment. But I love this ad because they take sexist language and derogatory mental health language that's used to destabilize women, and they've turned it on its head. So let's take a look.
If we show emotion, we're called dramatic. If we want to play against men, we're nuts. And if we dream of equal opportunity, delusional. When we stand for something, we're unhinged.
It's Super, it's gonna need to calm down.
When we're too good, there's something wrong with us. And if we get angry, we're hysterical or rational or just being crazy. But a woman running a marathon was crazy.
Officials tried to pull her off the course.
A woman boxing was crazy. A woman dunking? Crazy. Coaching an NBA team? Crazy. A woman competing in a hijab, changing her sport, landing a double cork 1080, or winning 23 Grand Slams, having a baby, and then coming back for more? Crazy, 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 and crazy. So if they want to call you crazy, fine. Show them what crazy can do.
So I have a 4-year-old niece, and when I think about this conversation that we're having around mental health, how it affects men and women, I think of her. And I think more broadly about the other girls and boys that are coming up behind us. And the most heartbreaking stat, which I've saved for the end, is that the suicide rate in children and in young people is increasing. Like, that's happening. And I think that there are so many things that are responsible for that, but I think that we have to ask ourselves, what are we telling the next generation about what men and women can be? And ultimately, do we want the world to be a better place than the one that we came up in? And I know I can't speak for all of you, but I don't know a single person that wouldn't say yes. Thank you.
Fantastic, cool. What a great start to the show.
Thanks.
Wow, very insightful, very interesting, and also just unbelievable some of the things that you see and hear there that aren't being done. Does anyone have a question for Poorna to kickstart the day? I know you guys in here are fueled up on coffee, so that's good. Anyone have a question? Okay, I'll give you a question. I'll give you a question. So, we've seen there are some great strides being made in the right way, but what can we do as an industry, as an ad industry, to encourage more of this, more stuff like Nike are doing? What can we do with other brands? How can we really push this forward?
I think that when it comes to all of this stuff that I've just covered off, is that I think that brands think that there's no budget for it, or that it has to sit separately. Like, you almost put your brand down, and then the campaign is there, and the two things aren't necessarily the same. And actually, I think that you can blend both of those things, and I think it tells you a far more powerful message. So that campaign from Lloyd's, that was actually part of, Channel 4 basically offered a £1 million award to a company that pitched an idea and then said that they would make it. Now, Ford pitched for it and they didn't get it, but they made the advert anyway. Right. Knowing that story, even though I don't have a car, knowing that story makes me respect Ford in a way that I don't think they could have done however many campaigns, shown swishy cars. It makes me respect them. So the next time I buy a car, I might think of Ford, and I might think about that. And I think it's that increasingly we are looking for emotional connection in the things that we buy, you know, especially alongside this conversation that we're having around the environment and around like the things that we actually want in our lives and how many of them to buy. And I think that people are being a bit more considered about where they make those purchases. So actually, if there is if there is a company wonder if it's an either or, I think it should be both, really.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
good. Thank you very much. We have one question here. Here we go. So you just got to warm them up first, and then they start going.
Hi. Can I say that was absolutely inspiring? Thank you so much for sharing that. That was sort of, you know, one of the reasons why we're here, and Jeremy and the team are putting this together.
Thank
you
you
so much. The industry we work in is a lot around talent. Obviously, everyone talks about tech and all this data and stuff. But at the end of the day, you know, when you've got agencies pitching for brands' business, you've got media owners pitching for agencies, and there's a lot of sort of, because I've worked in this side, normality. You know, sort of it's a lot of the sides that are the same, but obviously talent can be different. What's a kind of a key question that when they're choosing who to go with, if you're an agency, which media owner, or if you're a brand, which agency you go with? What's a key question you should think about to ask for talent and to get the right people, you know?
Do you mean when you're working on a campaign, or?
Or even when you're choosing your agency, when you're choosing who to go with? I mean, mental health is important for what performance they can help and give.
I mean, and sorry, just so I understand your question, so you're saying it from the viewpoint of if you're the client deciding which agency to go for?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And
Okay.
it's talent, yeah.
Okay, and which talent? Okay. So I think if I was a client and I wanted to know how my brand was going to be handled, I don't think, I mean, admittedly, I'll be very honest with you, I come at it from the editorial point of view, but from working within your space and what I understand, is that it's more than just the pitch. Like, it's more than just the bells and whistles of what they're going to give you. Because I think time and again, we see what ends up happening to brands that haven't asked enough questions at that stage. And in terms of the agencies, I guess, that you work with, I would want to know, especially if I was working around something to do with mental health or even like gender equality, is it holistically in their DNA as a company? Because if it isn't in their DNA as a company, how are they going to know how to handle it? Like, because hopefully what I've shown you in every single one of those videos, apart from the Dr. Pepper advert, has a lot of heart. Like, you feel it in here, right? Like, you can't, that's not something that you can manufacture. And so in terms of like giving you like practicalities, I don't feel like I can look into it, but I would say looking into holistically how they work as an agency. And also, like, who's on their team? Like, diversity is such a huge, huge thing, right? Like, is their team diverse enough to actually handle what is actually quite a complex, nuanced issue in some ways, really? Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Poorna. Thank you.
you.
Lovely, wonderful.
Thanks.
What a great start to the
Thank
day.
you.
Wow.